This relates more to the second part of our assignment, where effectively we're going to be, there we go. Effectively, we're going to be creating a book cover using only text as your design. So this will sort of make sense in that context, right? But incorporating type and using it as a design element, right? So early examples, I believe we talked about this earlier in the semester, but like illuminated manuscripts, right? Which would include like early Bibles, things like that, where all of this was based on calligraphy. Everything was hand done. So you had these text elements, but these interesting, often weird illustrations. You have this capital S here. And I always blank on the term. I'm pretty sure it's a drop cap. They still use it today where like the first letter of like a paragraph is like, if it's like once upon a time, the O is really big and then it starts, you know what I mean? That's where that came from these illuminated manuscripts, right? So it's just to create visual interest, but also separate sections. We have some more examples here. We have this lowercase a. Not quite sure what that letter might be, but anyway. So a lot of this comes from these illuminated manuscripts, right? Some of the typesetting things that we have today. Text and poster art, again, using text as a design element. These were all hand done, but you get the idea, where we have something that's a little bit more illustrative, the title or the name of the brand in this case, and then the information, again, is a little bit more clean, where some of these concepts that we're talking about are not new concepts, right? So you have sort of more important information is a little bit more clean, a little bit more easy to read. Again, here, we have a lot more illustration, but again, you have some repeating patterns, and then relatively clean. Here, again, more important information, relatively clean, easy to read, visually legible. Where we have two different examples here, Art Nouveau and Art Deco. Art Nouveau was very, very illustrative, had a lot of this filigree kind of thing. But even still, even though it's very stylized, it's for like these cookies. It's an odd illustration for cookies, but still. Where we have the name or the brand name of the cookies or biscuits is, again, relatively clean. They cleaned up the background, a relatively simplified font when compared to everything else. And then you have this sort of balanced with a very, very detailed illustration. And then here with Art Deco, more like woodcuts. Again, we have more simple information. This was for the Department of the Interior, National Park Service. So it was really just sort of like a PSA for watch out for animals on the road, etc. So it was a little bit more important to have a very simple, very easy to read, understandable message, right? Visual literacy. Political posters, it's where we start to see, or maybe not start, but where we see more changes in fonts to emphasize. So like in these two cases, the U, like we're focusing on the person reading this, so they wanted the U to be sort of more the sort of punchy effect here. And then with the We Can Do It, Rose of the Riveter, like I use this example because imagine, again, if we chose a lighter, like in the very beginning example, if we chose a really, really light, more delicate font, that would already carry a very different message than this very strong, powerful message that they want to portray with this particular illustration, right? Movie posters, again, some more stylized, some not, but how they're working the text into the design, into the overall look, even with the Frankenstein and Camelot, how it's a little bit more detailed, and the Metropolis has a very stylized logo to kind of go with this cubist effect that they have, but working in text more as a design element. Music posters we can kind of get away with, basically based on the subject matter and what you're advertising, and then also when. You'll see a lot of music posters, even today with silk screens, are not necessarily meant for advertising, but more sort of for fan service. So you can get a little bit more abstract, especially in this case. You can get a little bit more abstract. They might not be as visually legible, but they're not necessarily intended to be so. They're more aimed towards fans, or you're already kind of preaching to the choir. So you can get a little bit more out there. But again, you can see, especially in this Jimi Hendrix, how they're using design as a type as a design element rather than just informational. And then that brings us to book covers, which we'll talk about for our assignment as well. But starting to incorporate text as part of the design to also give you an idea of the feel of the book, potentially even an indication of what the book is about, aside from just the title here, like the teleportation accident. So we have multiple iterations, potentially with these separate vertical graphics, potentially indicating that there's multiples. Maybe there was more than one accident with this teleportation unit. I don't know, I've never read the book. Or in this case, in the industry where we have the crane literally taking away the eye. Very simple, but very, very effective, right? And then a couple more examples where we have here. Again, a lot of variety in the text. The only sort of nitpicky thing I would do with this personally is I would have taken this block of information and maybe set it within this literal white space rather than kind of offset here. But we have a sort of more heavier mix between serif and sans serif fonts, but heavier, bold, stronger fonts to indicate that it's actually anchored. And then we have sort of a more softer, more elegant, bottom-weighted design with the G to indicate sort of that dangling, right? And then this is where we talked about balance and creating tension, right, through balance or through shape and object, right? So this overall design would be top-heavy to create that sort of sense of unease, tension already. And then you have this literal sense of tension with the G kind of hanging onto this corner and dangling, literally dangling. You have that sort of visual tension within that one character. And then especially since the character is very different from these other characters, it gives you more focus on that G. Kind of like that goofy teardrop tension example I showed you guys a while ago. This is a little bit more actual design example of that. And then here, although it's not text, but again, a relatively simple, clean use of text and image to potentially talk about, obviously, gambling, crime, and society. Obviously, something not so great happened here. And I believe, oh yeah, and then we have our movie stuff. So this happens a lot with, a lot of times it's legal. So you have a lot of disclosures and things like that where you have like the front cover, although it's outdated with DVDs, but you have this front cover, which is a little bit more clean, makes a little bit more visual sense, and then oftentimes you have all of this essentially legal information that you need to include, and that as a designer is the old, like I said earlier, it's the old 10 pounds of garbage in a 5-pound bag, and how do you make it look relatively readable. And then we have this nice little knockoff of Nemo. I didn't even know this existed. I just pulled this example because I thought it was funny. But yeah, so we have, again, a little bit less so than the Thor example, but you can see, again, with all the legal, we still have a ton. It's a little bit pixelated, but we still have a ton of information you have to include. But they did a relatively good job of making it fairly clean, fairly legible, all that good stuff.